January 6th was the day after the special election in Georgia. And of course, that was those two Democratic victories in that state are what gave the Democrats the Senate majority, and it was a total surprise. And the results of those races came in, as I recall, around 11 o'clock at night, or maybe close to midnight by the time those races were finally called. And then I did a hit with Fox News at around 3 a.m. on the Georgia special election results. And then, of course, my focus that next morning on January 6th was the Democrats unexpectedly winning the Senate majority and Chuck Schumer being the new majority leader. And it was a development that was largely unexpected. Republicans were favored to win those two races in Georgia, or at least one of them. The Democrats had to win both to win back the majority. And so I was focused on the transition and Schumer as new majority leader and Republicans losing power. And so I kind of worked, throughout the night, got a couple hours of sleep. And then the next morning was kind of, immediately, working on a story about, Schumer as new majority leader. And I headed up to the Capitol, very early, around, well, let's say 9 o'clock in the morning or something like that. And just to do some early reporting and pitching some stories and getting my basically story pitch for, the transition of, of power in the Senate. And so I wasn't really at all focused on the certification process in the House. That wasn't what I was really focused on that day. And, I was working at the Capitol probably until around, maybe 10:30 or something like that. And then I left to go home and take a shower and get changed because I had pretty much been working through the night. And I went to the Capitol early in the morning to kind of, get a jump on what was happening in terms of, the Senate leadership transition. And so, I hadn't had a chance to, really have a good breakfast or take a shower. I just needed to go home and refresh. And I did that. And I was, at home, I was watching some of the, I was following some of the debate on the floor of the Senate, because they were, there was debate on the objections to the certification of the electoral tally in various, of the electoral tally and the electoral, counts and results in various states. And I kind of I was monitoring the news, had a bite to eat, got showered, got changed, and then I saw that there was Twitter traffic about the protesters, gathering around the Capitol, and I really didn't think that much of it because protests around the Capitol aren't an unusual thing. But the Twitter traffic started to raise, I guess, concerns that this was starting to get a little bit unruly, and so I all my computer was still back at the Capitol. My workstation was set up, and I just basically walk out the door to get back. And as I'm walking to the Senate office buildings, there are these police squad cars just screaming down the road, sirens blasting, going like 60 miles an hour. And I'm just wondering, like, what is going on here? And so I get to the, I guess it was the Hart or Dirksen Senate office buildings. I think actually I tried both entrances. And I'm just expecting to pop right back in the Capitol, and the doors are locked. They won't let me in. And the police officers aren't even outside, their usual posts. They're inside behind these locked doors and kind of waving me away. And I was just very confused and irritated because I felt I had a job to do, and I had to get back to my computer, and they wouldn't let me in. And so this officer explains to me, she says, "We've been breached. I can't let you in." And I'm thinking, what? And I said, "Well, how much longer do I have to wait out here?" And she said, "You just better go home." And I was like, really? And so, I remember feeling very frustrated that I was all of a sudden locked out. And then I walk over to let's see, the east front of the Capitol, and there's just, there's this crowd gathering. Now, at that point, it wasn't the biggest crowd in the world, but there were, I'd say, a couple hundred people on the Capitol, and the police had set up a kind of crowd control barriers around the whole East Plaza parking lot, and you weren't supposed to go past those barriers, but the crowd had just filed past those those kind of metal crowd control barriers, and were they were all over the East Front, and people were standing on the steps of the Capitol, which are prohibited. Usually, you can't go there, and they were just thronged on the steps. And so, I remember walking around and trying to get a sense of, for what was happening, and seeing, just taking in the scene. And I remember my biggest concern actually was catching COVID, because no one was wearing a mask, and I was just, my primary concern was, there's a huge crowd, no one's wearing a mask. I'm this is a COVID risk, but I kept on walking around, and then I saw I saw the crowd didn't seem particularly violent to me, but then I did see, I looked up up on the third floor of the Capitol, which is outside the press gallery, and I saw that the window popped open, and someone held up a sign outside the window saying, we're taking our country back. And I could see people walking up along the north side of the Capitol, just walking up on the plaza, walking through the security perimeter. Usually there's a guard shack there on the east front, and people just kind of walked right through that, and they were everywhere. And, and at that point, my wife, texted me, and she was like, you need to come home immediately. There have been, she told me that there had been bomb threats made, and that it was a dangerous situation. And so, I was there for a while, but I couldn't get in the Capitol, and the phone lines were completely frozen. There was so much, there's so much internet traffic and phone traffic, because there was such a big crowd and so much chaos, that you couldn't really send, I couldn't send out a tweet on my phone. I couldn't make a phone call. I could barely get text messages. My wife was freaking out, and I couldn't get in the building. So I just, and I saw there was a big crowd kind of lined up the center steps, banging on the door to try to get in. But at that point, I saw a video later that they actually, broke through those doors and barged their way in. At that point, they were just standing there, and they were kind of stuck outside. And, and yes, I knew there were people inside the Capitol, because the police officer told me that. And I saw people, sticking signs out the window, but it was just a situation of kind of, for me, helplessness. And I remember I was, calling the press gallery to try to get in the building, but I could tell that, people were really worried inside the building, because the message I got back was like, go home, don't come back. So that was my day, and it was frustrating. It actually seemed like kind of a party on the East Front. I mean, it kind of reminded me of going to a concert or something like that. People were sort of just milling about and kind of having a good time. It didn't seem particularly dangerous to me, and I did not see all the kind of all those violent images that we've since seen of the officers getting crushed at the entrance. That was all on the West Front, where people were breaking through windows and climbing through broken windows, and having spraying officers with bear spray, and swinging swinging dangerous objects at officers, and all that violence that we've seen in the, during the impeachment trial, all that stuff play out. I didn't see any of that. So that was all on the West Front. I think that was kind of where the violence was taking place. Where I was, people were just kind of milling around, and like I said, it was kind of like a big party or a concert or something like that. Um, and then, you know, the people that were kind of thronged up the central steps to the Capitol on the East Front, you know, they were getting agitated and impatient, and that's kind of where there was the biggest crowd concentration. And you know, later I saw that they did, you know, push through those doors and infiltrate the Capitol that way. So it, you know, it did look a little bit, maybe that looked a little bit scary, and maybe it crossed my mind briefly, oh, maybe I should go up there and check it out. But again, you know, there was such a dense crowd, and no one was wearing masks, that I just thought it was, you know, kind of a biohazard. And you know, but people, you know, were kind of in a good mood, and were, you know, thought they were having a fun time. Oh, and the other memory I have is I saw Alex Jones, you know, marching around on the East Front, and actually got a couple pictures of him, and he was with an entourage of, you know, 20 plus people, just kind of marching around like a little militia group or something like that. But then he kind of, you know, as things started to get out of hand, I saw him walking away from the Capitol, almost like he knew it was, you know, kind of bad news and wanted to distance himself from it. And, you know, that was, you know, I remarked on that to myself. Then, of course, when I finally, you know, got away from the Capitol and was able to sort of, you know, get internet access, because, you know, the cellular networks are so overloaded, you know, in the immediate vicinity of the Capitol, then I could see these kind of crazy images of, you know, QAnon shaman, you know, with his horned furred hat, you know, walking around the Senate chamber. And I could see these images. When I saw the images of people, you know, of kind of protesters walking through the Ohio clock corridor and, you know, pillaging the floor of the Senate, and that's when it really dawned on me that, wow, this is a big deal. You know, prior to seeing those images, I kind of, you know, I thought it was a, you know, kind of a protest that had gone too far. But it was really once I saw kind of the images of people, you know, those confrontations between the officers and the protesters, and people walking around the Ohio clock corridor and on the Senate floor, you know, flipping through, you know, senators' desks and sitting at the dais. That's when I realized, wow, this is really crazy and just unbelievable. And as everyone else did. And then, of course, you know, those images that came over from the House side with, you know, the officers barricading the House chamber and, you know, holding their pistols up against the door ready to shoot anyone who breached. You know, when I saw that, I was like, holy crap, this is, you know, this is really intense and unbelievable. And I, you know, when I was, it didn't, you know, it didn't hit me until later when I saw what was actually happening in the Capitol. But from the outside, it was kind of like, you know, it seemed sort of like a regular protest. And then I remember looking up and saying, oh my God, there are people in the building. They're opening windows and waving signs out the building. I mean, it just kept on getting crazier and crazier as the day went on. You know, my first reaction was I was annoyed that the cops weren't letting me in the building. And I thought, oh, you know, this is kind of a classic police overreaction. And then I walk over to the, you know, as I said, the East Front, and I see, you know, people have, you know, walked past the barriers, and I'm thinking to myself, well, they're not supposed to do that, but, you know, okay. And then I see, well, now they're standing on, they're thronged up the steps to the Capitol. Well, they're not supposed to do that either. I mean, it was just like a kind of a cascade of revelations that, oh, this and now that. It just, I mean, I was just constantly being, you know, surprised as it's happening. I mean, you kind of, I mean, I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, this isn't, you know, this is wrong or this is troubling, but, you know, I was finding myself like constantly surprised that like it was even worse. Oh, it's even worse. It's getting even worse. Like, and, you know, and I think, you know, finally you know, I think when I saw the images, I mean, I think the most searing images were from the House chamber, where you actually had, you know, pictures of the officers, you know, stacking up furniture against the doors and, you know, pointing their pistols at the doors. That's when it was just like, whoa, like what the, like, you know, the same reaction that the whole world had, I'm sure, like, what the hell is going on? This is completely nuts. You know, and it didn't, you know, at first when I saw the protesters, look, you know, you know, protesters are, you know, thronging the Capitol is, you know, that is not an unusual thing. That has happened many times. So I didn't think that much of it, although usually, the cops do a good job of keeping the protesters kind of away from the immediate vicinity of the building. And I thought, well, they've kind of, the crowd control is these people, these protesters are kind of, they kind of feel emboldened to go wherever they want. And standing outside the Capitol, I didn't see any cops whatsoever. I mean, it was usually usually the East Front is well patrolled, and I didn't see a single officer anywhere. It was kind of like, Lord of the Flies. Like, people were just doing whatever they wanted to, and were standing on the steps, and just completely overcrowding the central steps. And then when I looked up and I saw the window pop open, someone holds, it's like when they pull down the flag on the boat and they put up the little skull and crossbones. It was like that type of moment. I'm like, oh, looks like they've taken over. So finally, I finally got back in at 10 o'clock at night. And after everyone had been cleared out, and I was walking around the first floor of the building with actually Senator Michael Bennet of Colorado, and we were both kind of surveying the damage for the first time, and we were both kind of in this state of disbelief. Just like it was surreal, really. Like, this is a place I worked, for many years on a daily basis, and to see it completely trashed was just like, it felt like, home invasion is a good analogy. It felt like a complete violation of, a place that is held sacred by the people who work there. And I think that is true. I think it is considered a sacred space by the people who work there, because everyone who works there, I think, takes it all, very seriously, and thinks it's important business. That's why we're there. And I just remember seeing like all the shattered glass, on the hallway on the first floor to the crypt, and they used to have all these like little educational displays, and they'd all been like just completely trashed. These are like little history displays for visitors. Like, they're just shattered, trashed. The glass was strewn all over the floor. I remember the whole first floor. There was the fire extinguisher. There had been all these fire extinguishers just discharged, and so there was kind of this this big smoky mess everywhere. Once once the Senate reconvened, started working again, then they continued tallying the election results and debating the objections. And so I finally left sometime after midnight, I think, from the Capitol. And as I'm walking out, there's shattered glass and foam from the fire extinguishers, and it just looked like sort of a battlefield. And then I see in the middle of the hallway here on the first floor of the Senate, as I'm leaving, there's this trash can, janitor's trash can, and sticking out of it is this kind of this Tea Party flag, the yellow flag with the coiled snake and the motto, "Don't tread on me." And I just remember seeing that, and it was very symbolic. It almost said to me, like, this is kind of symbolic of what the Tea Party had become, co-opted by this J6 movement, and and everything and it just had really, the people who had done this had kind of tarnished themselves and tarnished America, really. And so the flag was just sitting in the garbage can, and I thought it was an appropriate and evocative image for the day.
So when did you finally get your laptop back?
Well, when they finally let me in the building at 10 o'clock at night. And so that was so irritating to me, because you just had like 1,000 people rampaging through the Capitol, and yet I can't get in. I'm like the little rule-abiding reporter, like, "Excuse me, can I get in now? I have a job to do." I couldn't get in, and and then finally, God, I was waiting outside in the cold for like an hour and a half to try to somehow figure out a way back in the Capitol at 10 o'clock at night. Finally got to my computer, finally was able to, just, catch up on the stuff I needed to do and, survey the damage. And, I just remember feeling, to me, it was all personally, I know it doesn't make a lot of sense. It was all just intensely frustrating because I just felt like, that I was, that I didn't have any control, that the whole thing, it just, just run amok. I mean, to me, it's a weird thing. Like, it was this feeling of just intense frustration that, like, I couldn't do my job, and I guess a lot of people felt that way, and I think that's why it was very. I think Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi, I think, were heroes that day because they were very intent. Look, we're not going to just go home and come back another day. We're going to come back this day, and we're going to complete our work this day, and we're going to show that the Congress won't be deterred, and we will do our sacred duty. And they did it, and I think that was very important. And I think everyone felt, at least on to some level, like I did, like just angry that this crowd had tried to stop us from doing our jobs. And and then we persevered until we finally could get back at our workstations, and that's what we had to. And I guess that's the that's why it's an insurrection. It's it's like trying to interfere with the appropriate and necessary order.